Welcome to the Strong Starts podcast with your hosts, Jessica Whitehead and Sarah.
Hey guys, welcome back. Today we are talking about masking and cognitive load. As the education community starts to come to a better awareness and understanding of the experience of the neurodivergent community and folks within that community, we thought we would talk today about all of the different types of invisible labor that neurodivergent folks have to do in order to kind of conform to those expectations that are placed upon them throughout their day.
Yeah, and as we're becoming more aware of what it is to be neurodivergent, masking is still kind of a newer concept. And so when I was diagnosed 22 years ago now, it wasn't as well known. And so when I saw a psychologist to talk to them about my struggles with mental health, there was some comments made about how maybe I don't have mental health struggles because I was able to keep it together during my workday. And he's like, well, you're going to work, you're functioning, you're able to complete tasks. And so maybe you don't have mental health issues because in a couple settings, I didn't show signs of those. And so I really wrestled with that. And it was kind of this internal battle of maybe something isn't wrong with me, maybe something is wrong with me. But what I did know is at the end of the day, I was so exhausted. There was times where I would just crawl into bed because I'd get home and I just felt it wasn't just in my brain, my whole body was just so tired. And I finally decided to see somebody different who explained to me what was really going on with me. And what was not just going on in my brain, but actually the toll it was taking on me, all the way down to my toes. So it was my whole body tired. My whole body was carrying that load that I had to, manage all day long. And Sarah, I know you have a really good way of explaining that through kind of this theory you've been studying.
Yeah. And first of all, thank you for sharing and for being vulnerable about your experience. There's a lot to unpack there. So we'll unpack that over the course of this episode. But yeah, Christine Miserandino is an activist and writer and blogger for the chronic illness community. And she developed this theory called spoon theory. And basically what it says is, every day we start our day with a certain number of spoons. And each task that we have to do throughout the day, we have to use up some of our spoons. And what might require one spoon for me to do might require Jessica, 2 spoons from you. So something like getting up out of bed might take me 1 spoon and you might need 2 spoons and so on. And the neurodivergent community has kind of grasped onto this a little bit because it helps to describe the experience of, throughout our day, some tasks that take some folks no energy at all, or they don't even have to think about it, take us more energy, or we have to put more thought into it. And one of those things is masking. And so, Jessica, you touched on it. So could you expand for us a little bit about what is masking? What is that experience?
Yeah. And I think when we talk about masking, I relate it sometimes to camouflage, right? Like we're out there and we're camouflaging ourselves to fit the environment or to blend into the environment. And it's a little different than adapting. So when we talk about adapting, we're talking about, okay, I have to go to a restaurant and I'm going to sit down and I'm going to behave the way that we are to behave as a society in a restaurant, which is different than having to put on, I guess, a show in order to make sure that you don't come across as different or to make sure that people see you a certain way, to function the way that you don't typically function. And when we think about that, some people might have to do that more often than others. We have some people that have to do that on a daily basis. And we have some people that, there's days where masking is not needed so much for me. And so I find myself more tired sometimes and then less tired other times.
Yeah, 100%. Like this week, so I have borderline personality disorder and I go through these highs and lows. I kind of cycle. Part of it is like mood swings. This week has been a lot of masking because I've been very depressed. And this labor, the additional labor of having to be thinking about your every step and trying to put on a face and do all the things, it can be exhausting. In addition to being just very tiring to be masking all day. There's also this identity piece. So you talked about the difference between just kind of adapting to your environment and then having to mask. And I think one of the key elements that I hear from other folks in the neurodivergent community is the identity loss that's experienced when you're masking, because all day, or what we're learning early on is how to cover up who we are. And it creates this identity confusion throughout your life to the point where you're an adult and you're going, wait a minute, who am I? I've been trying to be this person this whole time for the communities that I'm in, for the environments that I'm in. And now I don't really know who I am. And it creates this identity loss that I think can lead to a lot of additional mental health struggles for folks. That's what I'm hearing, at least from folks, is their experience. And so I think that's another key difference. But one of the other ways that we're using up our spoons throughout the day is with the additional cognitive load of completing any given task. This might be having to exist in environments that are attacking the senses, or, there's sensory needs that aren't being met. This might be the additional executive function skills that are required to complete a given task. So, Jessica, how do you see a cognitive load and that showing up in schools for our students?
Well, to put it in perspective, think of what as an adult. So, as an adult, we all have bad days, right? There's a day where we wake up, everything goes wrong. I'm trying to get my kids in the car. I'm getting in a fight with my husband. I spill drinks all over my shirt, whatever. I'm running late. And so at that point, when I get to work, I am just done already. And it's only like 8 o'clock, right? So I am just done, but I still have to do my job all day. And so if you're a neurotypical adult, you still can relate to the fact that you've had a bad day and you still have to get through the rest of your day. And through the rest of your day, you're putting on some sort of performance. You are making a presentation. You're teaching kids. You're, doing marketing deals, whatever you do through the day. And when you get home, you're just tired. You were already done at 8 o'clock. You put on a show all day and then you're tired. So for somebody who that happens once in a while, that's much different than somebody who does that on a daily basis. So when I was trying to work through the diagnoses of anxiety, ADHD, having, a form of bipolar, and trying to figure out, gosh, why am I so tired? And it's not just one day, it's every single day. And how do I get through this? When you think about that as an adult, now think about that as a child. Because as an adult, hopefully we've developed skills, or we have some way of processing. We research, we Google. We have kids who are still fighting this and still coming to terms. I mean, you think of when kids get diagnosed, sometimes it doesn't come till later, depending on the diagnosis. And we get kids that come in kindergarten, so we are still trying to figure them out. I know through high school, there's a big identity piece with teenagers. And so in the school setting, you think of a few factors. I think of fear, and I know that was something I battled. Do I want people to know that I have these problems? I need to fix these problems so people don't find out I have them. The stigma that surrounds mental health. I mean, we see it, we live it, hear it from my own children when they go to school. There's making fun of that happens, or and even if it's not making fun of, you notice, right? I notice that this kid has this, or this kid looks and acts different in these settings. So kids are not only masking, to fit in, but they're masking because of fear of. And so it's really affecting their identity. And we've seen it with a student in particular where they can try to make it, part of the morning. And then by the afternoon, we're done. Like, we're done. We can't take it. And they're communicating with these big behaviors because they're done. And it's seen as defiance. It's seen as noncompliance or refusal. This is the kid that is an eloper, a screamer, a hitter, or biter. And really, they just don't have the coping skills to manage this masking that they've had to do for hours.
Yes, all functioning just kind of goes out the window at that point. And it can lead some folks to really feel just completely burned out. And people, talk about like crashing, just hitting that wall where they just can't anymore. Because we kind of drifted into talking about schools, this is something that I've been trying to figure out, and I'm hoping we can unpack it a little bit. But there is a systemic problem, or I guess a situation in which the system is set up to really say, we only take care of what happens in schools. If it's happening within our four walls, we'll take care of it. And like the student you described, yes, the behavior's happening in school because they're not making it the full, 6, 7, 8 hours of the day. But for some folks, what they experience is that they are able to make it through the day. And then, like you were saying, when you were talking about your personal experience, they crash at the end. And some of our children are experiencing that. And so it's made me wonder, okay, well, what is the responsibility of schools if we say we only take care of what happens in this building, but we know that our kids, because of the expectations throughout the day and the skills that they're trying to use to survive throughout their day, we know that they're crashing afterwards and lose all functioning and can't have the rest of their life, essentially, like can't live it fully because of what they're experiencing. What is the responsibility of the school then?
Well, and that is something we battle because when we're taught on, how to analyze data and
Mhm.
we're taught on how to give assessments, we look at the settings that these happen. So say, we're looking at this student and we see, wow, they have great mornings, so something must be wrong in the afternoon. You know, yes. Maybe they have math in the afternoon and math is difficult for them. So then we see this, problem behavior in the afternoon. But we also have to figure out as a system how to differentiate between, okay, they're not doing well in the afternoon because they've had to mask all morning and it just happens to be during math time that
Mhm.
they're just done with it. Maybe math's a little difficult and they just can't handle one more thing on top. It's like the cherry on top and finally we're done. And that's one thing I battle as a BCBA, and I'm taking data and I'm finding patterns. And that's why if you've listened to our, previous episodes, we're working on a presentation about this right now, is we cannot just rely on one piece of data. We cannot just rely on this assessment. We cannot just name a function of behavior and leave it because there is so much behind that. And as a school system, and I think as a system as a whole, we're not trained to do that. That doesn't come naturally. We want to look at the numbers. This is what happens. Data doesn't lie. So here we go.
Yes, 100%. And I think we are coming back around, or at least you and I are. I know that we've talked about this a lot, but coming back around to trusting folks' experiences, trusting when kids or their parents are telling us, "Hey, this is what's happening," and really listening to those narratives, and trying to use those as well as additional data. Because you're right, we did this whole shift towards numbers and so this really, really great data collection. But there's this piece here when it comes to masking where we're going to have to just listen to people's stories because you're right, we might miss it. We might not see it. And it gets really complicated.
Yeah. But here's the reality. So I think this is another thing that we battle is in order for me to have an income to provide for my family, be a good mom to my kids, there are times where like I have to mask. I have to mask to go to work. If I didn't and I was in a low and I was just like, fine, I'm not doing it. I wouldn't have a job if I did that every single time I was struggling with my mental health. And so in that case, masking is necessary for me. I couldn't do my job without masking. And there's times I couldn't be a mom without masking. I'm not just going to never go to my kids' events or things like that. I hear this from some adults, but we have to prepare them for the real world. In the real world, they are going to have to do that. I think the difference and the lens change that we have to have is there are coping skills around that. I have a support group in my home. My husband completely understands. I got very lucky with someone so empathetic and understanding. And I have worked since I've been diagnosed and created an understanding, worked so hard to develop these coping skills where, yes, if I have to mask, okay, what can I do before and after to help release some of that, tension my entire body is feeling.
Yeah, and there was some choice in that. Like you got to choose with more autonomy than students have for, compulsory education. You got to choose the ways in which you mask. Like you got to choose that you are going to do this because you want your career and your family and your kids and all the things. And so there's maybe more felt autonomy there. I know that I feel more autonomy. I know that even when it's hard, I'm doing it because I want, my career is really important to me. So I'm going to do all the extra labor that I have to do and make the sacrifices I have to make in order to get through my workday. And so I think there are ways in which we can impart some of that autonomy. I think first it's by incorporating some sort of education for young people about what it is that they're experiencing. And then, like you said, some education around the coping skills, like actually helping young people develop their coping skills. And, we talk about scaffolding and things for academic skills. I think that there are opportunities for schools to provide some scaffolding for neurodivergent students who we know they have this increased cognitive load so that the load isn't as high, or they have more opportunity to rest and unmask and feel safe throughout their day. I think little opportunities like that can give students more autonomy over their experience.
Yeah. And luckily, we really do have a great team that we work with because we have, OT and occupational therapy assistant who are really pushing for sensory menus, sensory diets, just to help with that piece. We have a school psych who has been incorporating executive functioning skills into her evaluations and her recommendations. And we're seeing more goals put into IEPs around executive functioning and helping students understand how their brain is working, and what to do when these things are happening. So I see the progression in education, and I really appreciate those little pieces that we're putting out there. But as we've said before, our education system as a whole is just not built for that. And so we have these little pieces, but they're still being done in silos. So the student is still going to the resource teacher in order to get instruction on executive functioning for 25, 30 minutes. And then the other 7 hours of the school day, they're in a classroom or, wherever they are in the school. Or if they need something for sensory, they're going to a sensory room in order to have that. And then they're being inserted back into this, high stimulating environment.
Well, yeah. And that brings up a good point, which is how do we, and this is the long game, Jessica, but how do we start to transform the environments themselves, the systems themselves, to be more inclusive for all neurodiversity? And that is a philosophical shift that I see happening. I do see it happening. I know it's slow and that can be frustrating for people, but I see this happening where people are starting to learn more about neurodivergence and what people's experiences are, and people are starting to really listen in and join in an understanding of what that experience is like. But now we need to see the systems themselves and the classroom environments being reshaped as well. Do you see that? What do you see happening there?
Well, I think there's a few things that can be started, and I see some teachers doing it. And I know some teachers are just not sure how to do it, or they're kind of dipping their toe in the water with it. But I think it starts with safety and acceptance. So sometimes, well, I would say most times, we're masking because it's not safe to not mask, and for various reasons. And so providing that safety for anybody to be okay with who they are. It's okay that I have this label. It's okay that I am, I have an IEP, and it's okay that I need these things. And then this acceptance, and it's not just by the adult. So I think one thing we're missing, and I had to come to realization with it as a teacher as well, and I think it's the teaching of the others. So we have, and I say that as the neurotypical community. So we have neurodivergent students in the classroom, and we're getting more and more. If you're in education, us neurodivergents are everywhere. But what is being done with the students who are neurotypical or not neurodivergent and to help build this acceptance piece and help them understand that it's okay. Everyone needs something different. We have different tools, and we are making some headway with that. We have universal access now where a lot of students, these tools are just available to anyone who needs it. You don't have to be this or that in order to get tools. But I really do think the more education and the more safety we provide, the more we're going to be, and that's in any environment, workplaces, whatever, the more we're going to see people be able to unmask little bit by little bit.
Yeah, the hardest thing sometimes is just thinking about, the times when been maybe like unmask a little bit at work is the thought that, oh, somebody is going to think that I'm rude or not their friend anymore, or that I'm going to hurt somebody. And so I think you're absolutely right. From a young age, we can be teaching peers that friendship looks a lot of different ways. People come in all sorts of different ways. Like people are different, and that's a great thing. And helping to create that acceptance and understanding and inclusion from a young age can make a world of difference.
Yeah. And I do agree that teaching empathy before, and I know we've talked about this before, the empathy can come before the understanding the label. We can create this sense, and that's what I guess I mean by acceptance, is we can create this sense of empathy and safety and understanding with our students. It doesn't have to be because we have a student with autism in our class, we're going to start developing an understanding of autism. It can just be this development of understanding acceptance of just the world around us. We can just develop that. We don't have to wait for a label to happen, a stamp to be put on a paper, an IEP, whatever. We can just start developing that. And I think about this time I was in the grocery store and this student, and I guess this is kind of a little bit of a tangent from masking, but this child was not masking. And I don't want to assume what diagnosis he has, but he was wearing noise canceling headphones. I'm assuming he's probably middle school age. And he's stimming and he's loud and he is letting out these screeches every few minutes. And I was in the produce section and I could hear it. And I was moving from the produce down to, the meat department, and I could see in my line of sight all the way down, and he was like at the other end of the store. And it was interesting because what I was really focused on was not this child. I was focused on everybody else. I was like, oh, I wonder how everybody else is reacting to this. Yeah. And we have some people that were, just walking down the aisles like nothing was happening. And we had some with wide eyes. And, we had other children in the store that were acting like nothing happened, who were paying attention. Questions were being asked. And so I thought about that moment and I think, wow, as we develop this understanding, if that happened in 1990, it would be it would be that kid would not be in the store. We'd have people like, you're not allowed in here. And so we have moved forward as a society of acceptance. So I think as a society, we still have a way to go. But in that moment, I realized that there is acceptance and it's happening. Like it was happening in that moment. And I was like, wow, this parent feels comfortable enough to bring their child to the store, and the child needs that experience. And the child deserves to be able to go wherever he wants to go and feel safe to do so. So I kind of, and I didn't, but in my mind, I wanted to be like, good job, mom, and like high five her in the store. But that would be, I didn't do that. But it was just a cool moment to experience.
No, I love that. I'm getting emotional even just like hearing it. But what that highlights for me too is that it can really start with the adults and what we model for the kids. And so on that note, if you are interested in learning more about neuro-affirming strategies and how to be trauma informed, Jessica and I will be doing that presentation. You can learn all about it on our website, strongstartsllc.com, but we're going to be presenting at Jessica, what's the name of the conference?
Behavior Supports in Schools conference on May 29th. And you can, at strongstartsllc.com/events, there's a button that you can click on to get more information and sign up. We just also found out, Sarah, that you can attend it live in person, live online, and you can also get an on-demand version, a recording to watch later.
Oh, excellent. So yes, we will be talking more about how to be neuro-affirming in our schools. So please join us for that or log on to the recording later. But thank you all for joining and for listening. We are Strong Starts Podcast on Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, and YouTube. So please join us there. And until next time, bye everybody.
Bye.